Good morning. Welcome back to Christian Companions. This is our 10:30 Sunday school class. We normally meet when there's not a pandemic happening. So if you stumbled upon this video, we're going through a book. I'll tell you what the passage is today so you can follow along if you don't have a book. But I doubt people watching this are surprised about what's happening. I think most of you normally are here. So for those of you who are regulars, welcome back. It's good to have you. I wish you were here. I say that twice a week, every week. But right now I'm talking to myself in an empty room. So what are you going to do? Hey, it's December 20th. It's almost 2021. We're nearly there. There's one more week in 2021. Before I forget, we won't be having videos for the next 2 weeks after this. I won't have time Christmas Eve week to record. Next week, the 27th, and I'll be on vacation, so I won't be able to record for January 3rd, but then the week after that, we'll be back. So hopefully you catch this and you understand, and sorry that we're going to miss 2 weeks here in the middle of the Christmas season, but also it's the Christmas season. Go enjoy it. You don't have to watch Christian Companions these next couple weeks. So, but as for now, December 20th, we are on Matthew 2, 1 and 2, and then also 7 through 15. So I'm going to say that again, just in case you don't have a book. Matthew 2, chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, and then also verses 7 and 15. That's 3 5s. So let's read it and let's jump in. Let's get to it. As you can see, this is map week. I'm very excited. I haven't drawn a map in a long time. And this is a good map. This is freehand. I didn't even look at a picture. This was a guess, and I'm pretty proud of this. But pride cometh before the fall, so who knows? Maybe I missed something. Let's go. Matthew 2, 1 through 2, and 7 through 15. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." Then, this is verse 7, then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. When they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And presented him. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up," he said, "take the child and his mother, and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." Correct. So, there's going to be an introduction, lesson context. The introduction is short and interesting. In 1937, Disney film Snow White was... The 1937 Disney film, Snow White, has given us many lasting catchphrases, including the famous and misquoted rhyme, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" In the movie, these words are spoken each day by the beautiful but evil queen to her magic mirror, which has knowledge of all things. The vain queen's sense of prestige and self-worth are tied to the mirror's daily affirmation that she herself is, in fact, the fairest in the land. So fragile is her ego that she becomes enraged beyond reason when the mirror finally says one day that a lowly peasant girl is now the fairest in the land. The powerful queen promptly disguised herself as a witch so she could destroy Snow White. Our passage today describes a similar scenario that also bore tragic and deadly fruit. Not sick. I just had a brownie. It was a very dense brownie, so it's all clogging up. I digress. It was really good though. Butterscotch. Who doesn't love butterscotch? Lesson context. Let's keep moving past my brownie. Matthew and Luke provide unique details on the story of Jesus' birth. Both contain genealogies that trace Jesus' human heritage. That was back in lesson 1, we talked about that. Both mention that angels announced Mary would conceive. Luke described the message delivered to Mary before her pregnancy in Luke 1:26-38, while Matthew describes how Joseph learned of its origins after she was found to be with child. Man, that brownie's killing me. Luke then offers a detailed description of the events leading up to the night of Jesus' birth, including Joseph and Mary's journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem for the Roman tax census, the fact that the newborn child was laid in a manger, and the visit of the shepherds, Luke 2:1-20. Matthew skips the actual birth story to describe the strange appearance of wealthy and mysterious Gentiles to honor the baby Jesus. That's today's text. The two accounts broaden our awareness of the events surrounding Jesus' birth, and also offer complementary perspectives on the implications of Christ's coming. Luke's focus on the manger and the shepherds anticipate Jesus' later emphasis on the poor and outcast. Matthew's story of the Magi shows how Christ's life and death would reach far beyond the borders of Israel to bring salvation to people of many races and nationalities. I also think it highlights the Christological efforts, or the Christological identity of Jesus. Taken together, the two Gospels underscore a key feature of Christ's ministry, reaching across barriers to bring salvation to all. Yeah, I think Matthew is writing to a predominantly Jewish audience, so he's trying to show that this is truly the Christ, because these Magi come to worship a king, and that's what they believed Christ to be. The Jewish people believed Christ to be the king, and so Matthew's highlighting he is the king, while Luke is highlighting Jesus was a god, but he was also a man, like born into a lowly position. I promise, it's just brownie. It was so good. I mean, I wish I could describe it better than dense, moist butterscotch brownie. It'd help if I had a cup of coffee. That would have been really good with it. I digress. We're going to keep going. I just can't stop thinking about this brownie. So let's jump into the lesson today. Matthew 2, verses 1a. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea. The end. Bethlehem, about 6 miles south of Jerusalem, was the site of many important events that Jewish audiences likely remembered. While Bethlehem was a small village in Jesus' time, it was It was the place where Jacob's wife Rachel, mother of 2 of the 12 patriarchs whose offspring became the 12 tribes of Israel, died in childbirth and was buried. The events of the book of Ruth are set in Bethlehem. Ruth's great-grandson, King David, was raised there. Because God had promised David that one of his descendants would rule over God's people forever, it was widely understood that the Messiah, a descendant of David, would also be associated with Bethlehem. See Micah 5:2 and 4. The word Bethlehem means house of bread, which doesn't sound significant, but when you realize that Jesus is the bread of life, and Bethlehem is the house of bread, you can see the connections there. This tiny, I made it, the star is Jerusalem, because that's the capital, generally, of ancient times in this area, and Bethlehem is just south and ever so slightly east of Jerusalem. So that's Bethlehem, that's Jerusalem, and they were coming from Nazareth, which was way up here. So that was quite a journey. So, 1b. During the time of King Herod, so Herod was installed as king of Judea by Rome in about 38 BC. He reigned until his death in 4 BC, some think even 1 BC. While powerful, Herod was never popular with traditional Jews who questioned his lineage. Herod was ethnically Idumean, which is what in the Old Testament was Edom. They resented his pro-Roman policies. Upon his death, widespread revolt erupted across Judea. So Herod's an interesting character, and it's worth talking about now because you'll see why he reacts the way he reacts to someone being told there's a king being born. So many of you know that in the Old Testament, Syria came and took over the northern kingdom of Israel and shipped them off everywhere. And then Babylon came and conquered Judea and sent them back to Babylonia, and then they came back. So from there, though, this was always kind of a tumultuous place. At some point, the Persians take over, the Greeks take over from there, and then the Romans. But even within that context, there's a time where the Greeks kind of lost it and there was no Roman control either. So it's kind of like there's this time called the Hasmonean period, which took place in the intertestamental times. Judas Maccabeus, Judah the Hammer, which is the whole story of Hanukkah, that whole Maccabean revolt, which took place again in the intertestamental times, they were all Hasmoneans. So there was a time of there was a time of Israeli independence called the Hasmonean dynasty, where they weren't really part of Rome, but they were helped by Rome to get rid of Greek rule. And so it was independent, but kind of propped up by principalities in an attempt to sow distrust among the rulers of that area. So there was this time of Hasmonean rule, which was a time of Jewish-led independent Israel that took place in the intertestamental times. So there was a time where Israel was independent, and it was in between Greek and Roman rule. What happened was there was a group called the Parthians who ruled out over here. I don't know if you can kind of see me, but out this way, kind of northeast of Israel and even Persia, north of Persia, where the Parthians were always a thorn in the side of the Romans. And the Romans were gaining control, and their empire was spreading. And the last king of the Hasmonean dynasty in Israel was a puppet king of the Parthians in an attempt to kind of destroy Rome as much as possible, or hurt Rome as much as possible. And so the Parthians kind of controlled the Hasmonean dynasty towards the end. But then Rome came and wiped them out, and that's when Rome established a Hasmonean king, but he was a puppet of so it went from the Parthians setting up a puppet king that was Hasmonean, so Jewish and of Jewish descent. And then the Romans came in, squashed that king, and set up their own kind of pseudo-Hasmonean dynasty. So they had a Jewish leader in control of this area, but it was a Roman puppet king. Then, that's when, a few years after that, so that was, I want to say 63 BC, 60s BC. So then flash forward to about 40 BC, and Herod starts to take over. And that's why, and this was a big deal because Herod, under the last Hasmonean king that was a Parthian puppet king, they conquered Edom and forced Edomites to either leave Edom or convert to Judaism. And so that Herod was from Edom, so was his father. They convert through force and coercion to Judaism. So Herod considers himself a Jew even though he is an Edomite. And it was because of forced conversion by the last Hasmonean king. So he takes over in 40. The biggest problem is right before his rule started, the king before that taxed the region so heavily. Like, it was the king of Rome at the time, not really Caesar, but the ruler of king at the time was Antony, who we all know as Antony and Cleopatra, Cleopatra of Egypt, who lived so decadently that they required this heavy taxation, and so they taxed this place heavily. And that's where this kind of the forced takeover of the region by Rome, the heavy taxation, and the cult of worship around Roman deities all started to sour how people felt about Rome. And then they established that Herod is king over the region, and Herod is an Edomite. He's kind of like a Jewish person in name alone, though, because he was forced into it and doesn't really care. And he also lives very decadently. And so this, all to say, like, that's why Herod kind of reacts this way, is because there's this very tumultuous, I mean, it's always tumultuous in Israel, but there was this very tumultuous ramp up into Herod's kingdom, right? It went Persia, Greece, Hasmoneans, Parthians, Romans, really rapid fire in the history of it all, like very, very quick. And then all of a sudden Herod's put into place, and he hears that a king has been born in Bethlehem, which is him being Jewish-ish and having established a pretty significant kingdom. Like, he controls pretty much this whole area. That's why when he dies, it becomes a big deal, because he has his grip over all this. So when he dies, it is a big deal. And so when he hears this, Jesus is born, this king is born, that's why he reacts this way. So we got that out of the way. But just worth noting, this is a big deal. It's important to know who King Herod is. And this Herod is different from the Herod that kills Jesus or helps kill Jesus. Also worth noting. So, 1C, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem. So, while the precise origin of the Magi is unknown, they are clearly portrayed as Gentiles or non-Jews. In ancient paganism, Magi were considered experts in discerning the will of the gods and divining the future. This was accomplished through observations of various elements of nature, such as stars, weather patterns, and the behavior of animals. Magi commonly served as counselors at the courts of royalty, giving advice on the basis of their supposed supernatural insight. The citizens of many nations were prophesied to come to Israel to worship when the Messiah appeared. This would usher in a new era of peace and prosperity as all joined as one people under God. The appearance of the Gentile Magi is the first indication of God's intention to fulfill this prophecy through Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, and the church's proclamation of those facts. The East may refer to Babylon or Persia, which had been home to large numbers of Jews since the Babylonian exile. That was during the time of Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel in the 6th century BC. Some scholars noting that Herod attempted to kill Jesus by ordering the execution of all boys aged 2 and under, propose that the events of Luke 2 occurred around 6 BC. One would think that Jesus could not have been born in any year BC, just by definition, before Christ. The blame lies with a well-intentioned monk of the 6th century AD who made a mistake in computation. The Magi may have arrived as much as 2 years later, during the last year of Herod's reign. Yeah, so basically, that's some good information. Magi are more than likely from Babylonia or from Persia, which is even further east. That's probably the likely scenario. Which I hope you can see on the map. Babylonia is basically modern-day Iraq. Persia is basically modern-day Iran, just so you know. So they're coming over there. And then, yeah, so Jesus was probably, I think the best evidence I've seen was from a book where they placed Jesus' birth around 4 BC. And that's why I say some have Herod dying as late as 1 BC. And so, yeah, Jesus was technically born before Christ. Jesus was technically born in BC. Basically, what that monk did was he took all the years that people lived in the Old Testament, and then he added up all the years of people after he knew Jesus was born. He added all those together, and he said, well, that means that there were this many years before Christ, and there was that many years after Christ, and therefore Christ was born 0 year 0, and like he did that math. There's a lot of problems with that. Number one, it's known now in ancient and especially ancient Jewish genealogies, you would skip a lot of generations, especially if nothing significant happens. So if you need to tell the lineage of your people, you're not going to hit every single one. You're going to hit the important ones, like I don't know. I'm trying to think. I couldn't tell you all of my ancestors, but I could tell you stories that I've heard from my grandparents and my parents about their relatives and stories they've heard from their relatives. Like, there's a story of, I have a relative named Gerhard Lehrkamp, who was German, obviously, who was smuggled over in a pickle barrel because he wanted to be with his family instead of fighting in the war. And so he's a relative of mine. Now, is he if I was telling my genealogy, I might say Gerhard Lehrkamp, Samuel O'Banion, who's my great-grandfather, Kenneth O'Banion, Keith O'Banion, Samuel O'Banion. Now, is that the order? No. But I'm hitting the highlights because that's the stories that we tell in our family. Same thing happens in Jewish genealogies and ancient genealogies. And so to just say, well, Methuselah was 900 years old, so-and-so was 600 years old, therefore they must have been direct father-son relationship, and they must have been, here, let's do the math. Not necessarily. There's probably some generations missed in there. And there's also an argument that the years of people that seem crazy, like Methuselah living over 900 years old, there's a pretty good argument that ancient Jewish genealogies assigned those years not as the actual years they lived, but as a signifier of their life. So like we do this in Revelation. 666 is actually a number to signify a Roman emperor, right? That's not. It's actually a number that, when you add all the letters of, I believe it's Nero. I can't remember right now. But if you add up all the letters of Nero's name, it adds up to that number. So a lot of people think that the numbers in the Old Testament might actually add up to words and have that significance. So it's like Methuselah might not have been 960 or however many years old, but that might actually be a number representative of something that defines him or his life, which is interesting. There's a very good argument for it. I can't articulate it well and in the time I have. However, all that being said, no, Jesus wasn't born in 0. Jesus was probably born around 4 BC, and there you go. So just a fun fact more than anything. Let's keep going. 2A. This one's going to be long, guys. I'm sorry. I'm just really excited about my map. I'm really excited about the Christmas story. 2A. And asked, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? This is the first time in Matthew's Gospel that Jesus is referred to as King of the Jews. The title is a glimpse of Jesus' trial before Pilate, torture, and execution. Yeah, it's also, again, Matthew's writing to a predominantly Jewish audience, and so he's really trying to highlight the Christological identity of Jesus. 2B, or not to be. Stop. We saw his star when it rose. So the Magi witnessed an unusual astronomical phenomenon. It was widely believed in antiquity that stars, eclipses, comets, and other astral events heralded significant events. Attempts to explain away the star's value by identifying it with datable astronomical events have often been little more than attempts to deny the miracle of the Magi's travel. The law of Moses clearly forbids the occult practice in which the Magi were experts. Still, God communicated with these pagan astrologers in terms they could understand. Since the Magi sought wisdom in the stars, God chose to speak to them through that medium, calling them to leave their home country in search of a newborn king. If it seems strange for God to speak through a forbidden practice, consider also that God forbade witchcraft, but chose to communicate with King Saul in such a setting. His ways are not our ways. Clearly, God ensured that Gentiles were included on the momentous occasion of today's text. Yeah, and actually, I talked to Gene Brainstetter about this. There's a Jupiter and Saturn, I think, are like crossing paths and coming together, and it's going to be this like kind of really big, bright star. And there's even a professor or two, a couple theologians, a couple really smart people that are saying, this could easily be the Bethlehem star. Like this could be how things lined up. I'm sure God could. I'm sure there's ways this could happen. I have a little problem with that and with other maybe it was a comet and it was just a slow tracking comet and all this stuff, especially in light of what we're about to read. I'll explain more in a second. But hey, I could be wrong. Let's keep going. Verse 7. Then Herod, that's going to happen this week, by the way. I feel like I just breezed by that. Saturn and Jupiter are coming together I think it's this week. It's like if you're watching this on Sunday, it's this week. They're crossing paths and it's going to be really bright in the sky. And some are arguing that since that happens so infrequently, that happened when Jesus was born, whole thing. I hope I explained that a little better. I feel like I just breezed right by it. Let's just breeze right by it now then. Verse 7. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. So, in Matthew 2:4-6, which is not in our lesson text, Herod's own religious experts advised him from Micah 5:2-4 that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem, about 6 miles south of Jerusalem. Herod's inquiry into the timing of the star's appearance foreshadowed his intention to quell this threat. We'll keep going. Verse 8. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." So based on the information his own experts had provided, Herod sent the Magi to Bethlehem in hopes that they would locate a potential political rival. The Magi, interrupting the situation in religious rather than political terms, appeared to be oblivious to his scheme. Herod spoke deceitfully when he claimed that he too wanted to worship this child. Yeah, Herod's obviously lying because he wants to make sure that there's no actual king being born. Verse 9. After they heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. So the reference to the star going ahead of the Magi has generated considerable discussion. Because Bethlehem was essentially a suburb of Jerusalem, that's a little heavy-handed, it would seem unnecessary for the star to guide them there. Yet the Magi were clearly not from the area and would need guidance to find the child, especially at night. The star here functions in a way similar to the manger in Luke's account. The shepherds were told to go into Bethlehem and look for a newborn child, not knowing the specific place. For the shepherds, the sign that they had found the right person took the form of a manger. The image of the star remaining over the place there where Jesus was... The image of the star remaining over the place there... No, okay, I did read that right. The image of the star remaining over the place there Jesus was, where Jesus was, recalls the pillars of cloud and fire that guided the Israelites. They put there, it's where. I knew I read that correctly the first time. Okay. Here's why I think trying to assign an actual astronomical event to the star is difficult, because they see it, they travel, they get to Israel, then it reappears to they verse 9, they went on their way, the star had seen, it rose and went ahead of them and then stopped where the child was. So either it seems like either it was gone for a second and then came back, or it even tracked a little bit. I don't know. You might be able to find an astronomical event like this, but to me it seems like these are effectively astronomers. Like, their job is to track the stars, and ancient people were amazing at this. Like, if you today put me in a boat with a compass at night in the middle of the ocean and said, "Find your way home," even with a compass, I might not get it right. If you did that to the Magi, they'd probably be pretty close. They'd be able to track some level of points in the sky, and so they would know like even the most insignificant changes in the night sky. And I mean, think about it. It's not like there's street lights. Like, there's zero light pollution. There's fires, and that's about it. And if you put a fire out, then it's immediately dark. So they would be able to pinpoint stars almost exactly. And so this doesn't have to necessarily be like a huge indicator in the sky, like God is putting a neon strip that says like Jesus is here, like over and over again. This could be it could be like a for us looking in the sky, like a pinpoint, a dime sized point in the sky, and to them that is mind blowing. Like, they're seeing something huge and different. Because what begs the question for me is verse 10. Let's go to verse 10. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. So the Magi doubtless were overjoyed because their confusion had been resolved. While their initial observation simply led them to Jerusalem, they certainly would have been surprised and confused to learn that there had been no royal births in Herod's household. Some students propose that the travelers had not seen the star for some time. Now its reappearance, framed by reference to the prophecy of the sacred scriptures, were clearly a direct sign from God. The long journey was reaching its goal. So yeah, I just wonder if it either disappeared or reappeared. I asked that question. I wonder how it looked. My big problem is, so they're astronomers, so they'll know any difference. But also, at night, I think a lot of people would notice, whenever you see pictures or nativities or anything, there's always this, like, I'm going to draw like a little square. This is a little picture, okay? This isn't part of the map. God didn't do this part. He didn't take out a big square of land in Arabia. Whenever you see, like, here's a baby Jesus, here's Mary, she's always kneeling and praying over Jesus. She doesn't have a halo ever, but whatever. Joseph is always standing, and he always has a staff, even though he's not really a shepherd. And then there's always just like a huge star just right over Jesus, just enormous. And I never questioned that until like a couple years ago when I thought, if the star was that big, everybody would have come. Like Herod wouldn't have the question of, where is this? And that's why I wonder, like, because if it's an event like Jupiter and Saturn is going to be pretty big in the sky, or like a blood moon, or like a blue moon, or any kind of like a comet. If anything that size that even like lay people like me or a shepherd or somebody could see the star and go, well, that's huge. You would go see. If there was a giant sphere of light hanging over a single house in a tiny town, you would go, we should check that out. Like, if all of a sudden tonight you look over at Hayesville and there's just an orb of light hanging over the town, you'd go, maybe we should go check that out. And you would drive and it's hanging over a house. You'd go, well, that's either the best Christmas display I've ever seen or something's happening. So this is what I'm thinking. This is my deep argument out of nothing, but also just thinking as an academic, as the Magi aren't really, they're, I think less occult and think more astronomers. Like they're tracking the stars, while they do attribute those to gods as well, but still. So this is, I think, a big enough event that astronomers notice, but not so big that Herod notices, which is important. Because if it was a significant event, even in the midst of billions of stars, because at night you would still be able to see all those stars at this time, if it was a big enough event that Herod noticed, like two planets coming together and being bright in the sky, a comet, whatever, Herod would notice that. Like there's major event, like especially the people he's consulting about prophecies. Like he has his own astronomers, he has his own scientists and people looking in the sky. So Herod would know certain things. But so this must have been a significant event, but not so significant that like everybody noticed. Do you see what I'm saying? And so this is just interesting to me. I've been thinking about this a lot. Like it can't be so big that everybody in Bethlehem is like, maybe we should check out Joseph and Mary's manger. Like, there's a huge star over there. But it has to be significant enough that certain astronomers from especially the East were going, man, maybe we should go check out what's over there. See what I'm saying? So, I digress. I'll get off my soapbox. That was me hopping off. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. 11a. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. So Mary and Joseph, who were from Nazareth, were, choked, were still in Bethlehem. The Magi first saw Jesus at a certain house rather than in a manger, where the shepherds met the family. It is possible that the Magi saw the star and began their journey some months before Jesus was born. In that case, what they described in Matthew 2:2 would have occurred sometime before 2:1. The results would be to see Jesus days or weeks after his birth. Matthew 2:16 may indicate an even longer period of time. The worship offered by the Magi does not mean they fully understood Jesus' identity. In fact, almost no one seemed to grasp Jesus' identity fully until after his resurrection. More likely, their reverence reflects the typical gestures of obeisance, interesting word, that would be offered to any ancient king. Yeah, being Magi's from the East, they probably are like, well, if this major astronomical event is happening right over this baby must be something. And I think, going back to what was said early in the commentary, they had some knowledge of other ancient texts. Like they would have known certain Jewish scriptures. They would have known certain different things from probably even surrounding areas. And so, and who knows, maybe God communicated it to him in a dream and that just didn't get written down. Who knows? There's a lot of ways that they could have known that this baby was significant, but seeing a star tracking a star or some kind of bright light and it happening to be right overhead of a baby being born was significant to them. 11b. Oh, and Jesus could be as old as 2 years old, because that's why Herod kills everybody 2 years and younger. So it could have been quite some time. Who knows? So that could even be an argument for them being further in Persia, because more than likely the fastest trade route, if you're from Persia, the fastest trade route would be to go up the Euphrates, cut across, and then come down. So, yeah, who knows? Could have been a long time. I doubt days. Could have been months to years after. 11b. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. The gifts offered were consistent with the mission of the Magi to honor a newborn king. Gold, of course, was precious. Frankincense and myrrh were rare and expensive items imported from southern Arabia in what today is known as Somaliland. Matthew surely sees the actions of the Magi as a fulfillment of prophecies such as Isaiah 6. Such as Isaiah 61 through 9. The number of visitors is unknown. The common view is that there were 3, which corresponds to the number of gifts. Even if only 3 dignitaries came to see Jesus, they certainly would have traveled with a large retinue of servants and security officers. Oddly, none of the Jewish advisors to Herod seem to have been interested in this new king, since there is no record of their joining the foreign men and seeking him. I mean, yeah, I don't know if it's odd. I think Herod's goal was to wipe out the newborn king and his family. If the Magi are going to worship this king, if Herod sends people with them, first of all, the Herodians, people of Herod, aren't very well liked in the region. So if the Magi and then a group of Herodians are with them, I doubt the people in the area would go, hey, we like this. This is great. Let the Herodians in. It could spell disaster. There's a lot of reasons why he wouldn't have sent people with him. Anyway, verse 12. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. So God continued to communicate with the Magi in a familiar way to them. As a result, they returned to their country secretly rather than reporting Jesus' identity and location to Herod. Herod was likely made aware that Micah 5 predicted that the Messiah from Bethlehem would destroy oppressors and their pagan religious customs. To Herod, this could only mean a challenge to his own pro-Roman policies. Periodic insurrections were not unknown in this time and place, and Herod was infamous for eliminating opposition. Yeah, he ruled with a heavy fist. So yeah, I say the main way you go from Persia or Babylonia is to go north up the Euphrates, cut across to the Mediterranean, and then go south. There are other ways. They're just far more treacherous. I mean, if you're going this way, there's a reason why this is blank. There is nothing. There is nothing there. You just got to trek out. So yeah. Let's keep going. Verse 13. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, he said, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. The commentary, an angel of the Lord had earlier appeared to Joseph in a dream to inform him that Mary's pregnancy was indeed miraculous. This time, the angel warned Joseph of the looming consequences of the Magi's informing Herod about a new king. The Roman province of Egypt was to be the place of refuge. It was home to a large and influential Jewish community at the time. Traffic between Israel and Egypt was common, and Joseph could easily find work and support there without drawing too much attention. The Magi's gifts, especially the gold, would be a huge help to the family during the sojourn. Herod is often portrayed as attempting to fight against God himself. How could any human being hope to thwart the divine plan by killing the Christ, whom God had sent? Nothing in Matthew's account, however, suggests that Herod believed God was behind the appearance of the Magi. In his view, they were either crackpot pagans or, more likely and more seriously, foreign agents involved in an elaborate hoax to generate unrest among the Jewish people. His failure to see the hand of God in the situation stands as a timeless lesson on the need to be mindful of God's movement at all times. Yeah. I think that's a very apt commentary on today's day and age. There's a lot to be worried about, but nothing to worry about when you trust God will handle everything else. So, just trust God a little bit. But yeah, so he's told in a dream, as Joseph has been before, move from Bethlehem, go to Egypt. Yeah, Egypt is part of the Roman Empire. Alexandria is a huge community. There's a lot of major communities, big Jewish population. Would have been easy to go to Egypt from there. So, 14 and 15, the last verses. So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." So, the commentary. Prophecies are often explicitly cited in Matthew's gospel. For instance, Matthew 1:23 connects the angel's announcement to Joseph with Isaiah 7:14. The verses before us quote Hosea 11:1 to explain why Jesus had to be taken to Egypt. Matthew 2:18 connects the massacre of the infants to Jeremiah 31:15, and otherwise unknown prophecy explains why Jesus grew up in Nazareth. These references to Scripture, combined with the various dreams and unusual star, work together to stress the unique role of Jesus in God's total plan of salvation. Yeah, and again, Matthew's writing to a predominantly Jewish audience, and as a Jewish person, he knows the Scriptures very well and knows that Jesus fulfilled all these prophecies. So that's the main reason why he's doing that, because Jesus fulfilled them, and Matthew, being a good Jewish person and writing to a Jewish audience, says, hey, you know those Jewish Scriptures we've been reading all this time? Well, Jesus fulfilled most of them. Yeah. So yeah, that's it. That's the story of the wise men, the magi, the astronomers, what have you. Next week is John the Baptist in Matthew 3. And then January 3rd is Luke 4. So again, the next 2 weeks, do not expect a video. I will be either working on Christmas Eve or working the next week. I'm here for like 2 weeks or 2 days before we really start getting underway with Christmas stuff. And then, and so I got to get ready for Christmas stuff. And then the next week I'm on vacation, and then the next week I'll be here. So 2 weeks without a video. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can call me or email me, samuelo@southrockchristian.com. And as always, I miss you. Wish you were here in this room and not talking to nobody. I wish I was not talking to empty chairs. Hey, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, if you celebrate any other ones. Happy New Year, and yeah, I'll see you in a couple weeks. Merry Christmas.